Hello everyone, I'm Alanah and welcome to my channel where I am not wearing any makeup right now. This is all sweat and sunscreen. And my hair is stuck to me. Sweat. It's hot. So today I'm talking about how I ended up in Nicaragua. A lot of people have been following these travel adventures and a lot of people have told me that they found it very informative, where basically I went home to Australia during COVID and I was talking about all of their restrictions and rules and basically just trying to travel internationally during a pandemic naturally is very complicated. If you go back to the first video I made where I said I was going to Australia, I was like, I don't know when I'll be home because I know that this is going to be hard, and it has been hard. I went home because my sister had a baby for the first time, and I'm very, very close to my family, and I hadn't seen them for 2 years prior, which, you know, for someone who I feel like my family members are some of my best friends, was very difficult, and I really didn't want to miss this moment. So I figured everything out to make it work, and did. But basically what ended up happening, which I tried not to talk about because I was advised to until it was dealt with because it deals with government matters, is I live in Los Angeles on an O1 visa. I work in Los Angeles on an O1 visa. I've said that before. You're not allowed to say live, you have to say work. Even when I fill out my paperwork, I have to put my mom or my dad's address in Australia, even though I don't live in either of those places. It gets very confusing. Sometimes I want to write where I live in LA, but then I'm like, oh wait, I'm not allowed to do that. I have to say that I live in Australia, even though I've never even lived in either of the homes that my parents live in. And I went home to be with my family when my sister had a baby, and she has. Her name is Madeline, and she's very cute and getting bigger by the day. I cuddled her. It was lovely. We had a great time. I was very, very happy to be there and very glad I went home, even if, the whole situation is really complicated. And, I'm tremendously privileged to have been able to do it and very, very glad I did. And yeah, it was really nice being with my family for such a significant moment, especially when I missed so much of my sister's wedding, like all of the planning and everything, which is really sad when you only have one sister. In any case, Australia has a lot of travel restrictions, and I have been saying since the start that I don't agree with all of them. There are some that I do agree with and some that I don't, and I especially have a little bit more perspective now speaking to my family about how they feel about certain things. Like one particular rule that I think is absurd that didn't affect me at all, but that my aunt was telling me about, is that if you're in one state and you fly to Perth, for example, which is, I think, about a 6-hour flight from Queensland, which is where I'm from. If you get on that flight, and while you're in the air in that 6-hour chunk, they change the rules, you could end up stuck in Perth for 14 days minimum, even if you only booked a trip for 3 days. I think that is an absurd rule. Like that, what do people who are caring for disabled people do? What do people with kids do? If they were only planning a trip for 3 days and then you change it in the air, Anyway, there are a series of them that I don't agree with, a series of them that I do. And basically, God, it's so sweaty. A struggle that I had, that I knew that I would have, was getting out of Australia. I actually was technically exempt from needing a reason to leave internationally, because if you can prove that you live in another country, then it's not a problem. But that paperwork process did take a while and just had a few hiccups that I actually don't feel would be valuable to explain because they pertain to my very specific work situation. That essentially meant that I was leaving Australia way later than I had initially planned to. There was an upside. I got to spend more time with my family. The downside, however, was that my visa stamp in my passport expired. This doesn't mean that my... I just can't believe that's funny. Look. This doesn't mean that my visa expired. My visa is still valid, which is how I work in the US. The visa stamp, for the record, is not actually a stamp. It's like a little card that they stick inside of your passport to show that you have a visa and that's how you enter the US. The little card inside the passport expired. So I was still legally allowed to work in the US, but I could not enter the US. If I were to enter on an ESTA through a travel visa, then working would be very illegal and would probably prevent me from getting any more visas and would get my employer in a lot of trouble. So basically, the way it works is, while I was still technically allowed to be employed, I have only missed one work day the whole time I was home. A lot of people asked me about that. A lot of people were very needlessly critical about my job. For people who are not my employers, I did miss one work day due to all of this travel chaos, but otherwise was working every day, like every other employee, like the other team members that we have that are on different time zones working from different countries. Y'all need to chill. But yes, not allowed to do so from the US because I could not enter the US on my work visa. I could only enter the US on a tourist visa. In order to get your visa stamp renewed, you have to go to a US embassy. So I was like, cool, I'll just go to a US embassy. This will be fine. It was not. At first, I tried to go to Melbourne. The Melbourne consulate only had like 7-day wait times. I was like, great, easy, no worries. We'll go to Melbourne. I have family in Melbourne. I'd love to see them. And I will get the visa stamp from the US consulate or embassy in Melbourne. And I will be on my merry way back to the US. Melbourne, the day before my appointment was supposed to take place, shut their consulate because of COVID. They actually just never responded to my request to enter the state. So you do, if you're in different states in Australia, have to apply to be able to enter a state. They just never replied. They did maybe 2 weeks later and were like, sorry, we missed your due date. So it did seem, based on the way that they replied, that they probably would have let me into the state. Because basically in the exemption, I was like, I've not been anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Just gonna get a hotel across the road from this embassy, go to the embassy, leave immediately. So I was not really a risk to the community and that I was not going to do anything else. But yes, I guess they get such a high volume that they just didn't even respond. So I was like, okay, Perth also has pretty short wait times. It unfortunately has a 14-day quarantine, which naturally I did when entering Australia. Don't love the idea of doing it again, but okay, let's try for Perth. Perth immediately declined me within 2 hours. I was not able to enter the state, so I couldn't go to that consulate. There is no consulate in Brisbane, which is where my family is. Would have loved that. Also, sorry for the webcam flickering. So the last option is Sydney. And the issue with the Sydney consulate is that the wait times would have me in Australia until November. You can expedite, which means, speed up an appointment, apply to get an appointment faster. There's no guarantee that you'll be approved for that. And even if I were, it was like late August, early September was the earliest that I would have been able to get an appointment at the consulate. And an issue that I had when looking at those wait times with Sydney's consulate was that I was like, there is just no way that this either doesn't get shut down, like they don't close the embassy, or if I stay in Australia any longer, I am so fucking sure that they're not going to let me leave. I was just convinced that there would be something that would happen. Flights were getting cancelled from certain airlines, and then it did actually come out a few days ago that the way that I was able to get out of Australia, proving that I live in another country, is no longer a valid way for Australians to leave, which is actually heartbreaking, and is heartbreaking for a lot of my Australian friends who live overseas. It basically means that it's confirmed none of us can see our families, because if we go, we can't leave. We can't come back to our jobs or our homes, partners, friends, loved ones in other countries, which really, it really does suck. So that did happen. I'm very, very glad that even though the lawyers were like, we think you should probably stay in Sydney, I was like, no, I need to leave Australia. I'm going to be stuck in Australia. I'm not going to get out. They're not going to give me this exemption because clearly I can work from Australia just fine as I have been. So I don't think they would have taken that as a valid reason. They would have been like, get the fuck out. Or stay the fuck in, rather. So I had the lawyers figure out other options. And what I was doing was looking at consulates all over the world. I was like, okay, can I go to the UK? No, emergency appointments only. And also there's a restriction. If you go to the UK, you can't freely fly to America. You have to get this really difficult to get pass. I was like, what if I go to Rome? That one looks open. No, they have a no entry policy, or there was like a quarantine. Like I was looking all over the fucking world for, I need an embassy that is open, that doesn't have absurd wait times, and that won't require me to quarantine. I would have done quarantine somewhere if I had to, but obviously that adds time on, and a significant amount of time too, because you're supposed to be in the country 14 days before your consulate appointment. That isn't necessarily necessary. They don't all require you to do that, but it is a general request, a general suggestion from immigration lawyers. And then it can take you 7 to 10 days to get your passport back after you've had the appointment, because they take your passports away from you to put the visa stamp in the passport, and that takes a while. So I was looking for days and days and days. I had all these people helping me, trying to figure out where I could go, where I could get an embassy appointment that wasn't closed. And basically my immigration lawyers came back and they were like, here are your 2 options, and the 2 options we've seen work for other people. And this is why I wanted to share this, because I feel like it's probably very helpful for anyone on a visa to do exactly what I did. Especially when there are a lot of countries where the consulates are only taking certain visa types, they aren't taking any, or they are only taking them from first party nationals, which means you are either a citizen of the country you're applying in, or you're American, which you wouldn't need a visa, but you can still need to go to a consulate. So they wouldn't even take an Australian unless I was in Australia. I'm what's considered a third-party national in Nicaragua, which is where I've been. So the options were Nicaragua, Bahamas. And I was like, I'm going to go to the Bahamas. Let's do this. That didn't work because apparently a lot of other people figured that out. The embassy in Nassau is now booked out until like June 2022. So my guess is that a lot of people had known that Nassau embassy was taking people, that you could go there without quarantine, that you could freely enter and exit. So it got booked out really fast. Nicaragua, I got my appointment very quickly. But that was basically the suggestion. So I've been in Nicaragua. I will talk about the experience in Nicaragua probably on the next episode of the Idiots in Abroad podcast, which is a travel podcast, whereas right now I'm just trying to talk about kind of the process of this. If I'm publishing this, it means I've already left Nicaragua. I'll probably publish this like several days, maybe even a week after leaving. I'm stopping in another country before I head back to the US, which is actually just for fun at this point. But yes, Nicaragua was the only embassy in the world where I could enter the country. I could get an appointment very quickly. And it was really quick. I think it was like 10 days or maybe it was 14 days because it had to be. It's been so long now that I've just been overseas that I don't even know dates anymore. But that all worked. And it you know, when I was telling people I work with, friends this, they were like, Nicaragua? There's no other option? And I did tell Corey, who I work with, and he was like, surely there's another option. Let me reach out to Sony's immigration lawyers and see if there's something else that we can do rather than have you have to go to Nicaragua. And I sent them an email and I was like, here's the situation. Here's why my lawyers think Nicaragua is the best option. And the response was like, no, that does seem like the best option. That is it. You've been given correct advice. You do indeed have to go to Nicaragua. And so I did. It was really the only global option for me to get this thing in my passport that lets me enter the US as a worker, even though I am valid to work in the US for a lot longer. A wild and very unexpected experience. Like, obviously, when I left, I just never would have assumed that the embassy in Melbourne would just close, or that Perth would just reject me, or that Sydney would have me wait till November, you know? Not that I ever expected to have to do the visa stamp thing in the first place. I didn't expect that to be a part of the trip. And I did add in buffer time. That was like after multiple delays getting out of Australia. It's a lot, but basically, if you're watching this and you are on an O1 visa, it probably applies especially for you, but I'm sure it would apply for a lot of other worker petition visas. Have you considered going to Nicaragua? Because I have friends right now who are in the UK who have to wait until February. It's chaotic. The amount of US embassies that are closed or in countries that you can't get to, that are just completely inaccessible, like or just absurd amounts of time. The amount of knowledge that I have on this now that I didn't know that I would have needed 3 months ago is just wild. So that's how I ended up in Nicaragua. I didn't say where I was because I was just advised not to. They basically I had two separate firms be like, when you're in a third world country, it is a very poor country, and you're there for a really specific reason, like trying to get your passport back from the US embassy. We don't want you to add any trouble. It's not like I thought I was going to get kidnapped, but it's just very easy for me to not tell the internet where I am. It's just very easy for me to be like, I'll just say it in 2 weeks, like when I've already left. Like, it's just not hard for me to follow their advice and retain that information and not share the country that I've been in. It's just not a struggle. So people were like, why are you keeping it a secret? It's like, I was just advised to. They basically say that, you know, if you're a YouTuber or someone someone that people think has money is what the issue is, because people certainly think I have a lot more money than I do. It's wild. Have you seen my studio apartment? But they basically say that if you're in a third world country, especially a young woman alone, and that you're there for something like going to an embassy, that you are better off just not making that public in case somebody has a shitty family member who's going to try and track you down somehow. I don't know how they would, but that's just the reality of it. And again, I always make a habit if I'm somewhere not posting anything about it on Instagram until several days later. That's just a thing that I've always been doing. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I will be back in LA very soon. Play, Watch, Listen will be back next week. Internet will be all good. And I am going to get out of this sweatbox of a look I have going on. I don't mind it. I'm very tanned. But yeah, that's pretty much it, everyone. It's been a wild ride. It's been a very crazy year for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. I don't feel like anything that's happened to me has been particularly terrible, just unexpected. You know, I'm doing great mentally. I'm not too stressed, and I know things could be a lot worse for me. I've had so many COVID tests, and they're all negative. So, you know, things could be way, way, way worse. But yes, I just thought I'd update you all, let you know where I've been. We'll talk about Nicaragua adventures, because I did go out on weekends. And it is beautiful. But yes, if I'm posting this, I'm no longer in Nicaragua, and I've probably been gone for a while. And that's pretty much it for me, everyone. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for following on with this wild adventure. Bye!